Hello everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Apologies for this upload being a tad bit late. Currently recording this during my 1 week break from streaming because, not gonna lie, a bit burnt out on content creation. When you've been doing this for 5 years, things kinda catch up with you. Regardless though, actually, I don't think I need to tell you guys. You guys are watching this, you probably already support Thorgi, but just in case you haven't, link top of the description.
Time to finally talk about the gameplay of Under Night, and let me go ahead and say, there are many things that can make a great fighting game, but I feel like two important elements are a high ceiling and low floors. So many developers want to create that fight.
I would agree. I think that there's more to it than that as well, obviously. But that is a very good basis, where you feel like you can get into it, but you have much more to explore. If it's low ceiling, low floor, then it's like, why am I even playing anymore after you play for a couple of sessions? I'm currently playing a lot of Soul Calibur 6 actually, in my off time during my break, because there's just cosmetics that I can earn by playing the arcade mode. And honestly, I wish more fighting games had motivations like that, because, you know, it's just a neat little thing to have to motivate you to play more. And in doing so, you end up getting better and you discover more about your character and how high the ceiling can actually be. Plus, it also really helps that, specifically for something like Under Night In-Birth, I recall saying during the streams that just pressing buttons in this game felt so good. And I couldn't really explain why.
Fighting game where any player of any skill level can pick it up and instantly find it accessible. But the more time you spend with it, the deeper it gets and the more potential you find. And so few games are really capable of pulling that off, but I will gladly count Under Night among them. Because this game is famous for how deep its mechanics get. I would be willing to argue this is one of the most complicated fighting games of this generation. If you want it to be. Because the amazing thing about Under Night is you can totally just play this game at the most basic, simple level, and you'll still have fun and find cool things that you can do.
Exactly what's happening with me and Kane throughout our entire fighting game journey, to be honest. There are just some games where it feels so much fun to simply play with each other, even though both of you don't really know what you're doing. But at a low casual level, it can still feel exciting, and really cool moments can still happen. Accidentally. But like, it still feels good.
Start of the ground floor. There are 3 main buttons, A, B, and C. Essentially light, medium, and heavy. Now, you can just mash away at A and you'll do an auto combo, but even the normal combos are incredibly easy to start with. Every single button can combo into every single other button. So you can do A, B, and C, but you can also do B, C, and A. Or you can do C, A, B, B, A, C, C, B, A, A, C, B. You can mix and match however you want, and you can easily link these standing attacks into low attacks to extend these combos even further. And this is the simplest thing in the world, and yet it still feels so good. So if you just want to hit these 3 buttons, you can do that, and you'll still have fun with this game. And of course, you can do your special moves by inputting a command and then hitting A or B, but if you hit the C button when you do that special, you'll use up half of your super meter, or as this game calls it, the Exis meter, to do a stronger EX version of that move. You can also do a unique attack that requires 100% of your Exis meter, and if you got full meter and your life total is below 30%, then you can hit all 4 buttons to do your most devastating attack, the Infinite Worth Exis. These are big flashy attacks that can help you to turn a match around or bring it to an end. And yes, I did say you could hit all 4 buttons, but we'll get to that in just a moment. For now, let's move on to the next floor of the Under Night skyscraper. Let's talk about how you can spice up these basic combos. I mentioned linking standing attacks and crouching ones, but each character has some kind of a way to pop your opponent up into the air. Typically some kind of a combination of crouching C followed by either standing or 3C. And after you pop them up, you can quickly jump after your opponent to continue your combo in the air. And many of your moves can provide you with wall bounces, ground bounces, or OTGs, so that way you can continue these combos even further. Also, many of your basic moves take on different properties if you hold the button down longer, drastically increasing your move pool. It's actually wild how much combo potential lies in just these 3 simple buttons.
Oh yeah, that's right. Completely forgot too that Under Night has the whole holding button system. Made some of the combo trials a little bit tricky, but even though you were failing the combo trials over and over again, it was still just fun to be pressing buttons.
But now on to the next floor of the Under Night complexity creep. Let's talk about what makes each character unique. Sure, they all have different moves and reach and everything else that you would expect, but each character also has their own unique abilities. For example, Linnea, an agile character known for her speed, has a double jump. Nobody else has that, just her. Hyde is the only character whose normal attacks inflict chip damage. Cordo,
yeah.
as I pointed out earlier, can steal your opponent's meter. These little variations between characters help to make them each feel so much more unique. Like, they don't just have different moves, they're actually different characters.
Oh yeah, for sure. A character I didn't think I would gravitate towards was Enkidu, but I don't know, man. He was just so much fun to play, and I believe his whole thing was Havoc. So basically, the way that you want to approach combat was to look for counter hits against your opponent, or like whip punishes or something like that, which, you know, is something that you normally do when you're playing any other fighting game character. But specifically you playing as Enkidu get rewarded for doing this and getting proficient at it. I do enjoy that these systems exist, or like these unique character traits exist to make the characters feel a lot more special, that you're maining said character and you're specializing in a particular thing. And I don't really think Under Night has a universal system that kind of breaks that balance and removes any of the like character weaknesses or character strengths. Like, well, I don't fully understand how it works, so maybe this is a bit ignorant of me to say, but I feel like Wild Assaults in Guilty Gear Strive was not very well received for that exact reason. At the very least, that's my understanding of why so many people are so happy that it's getting removed in Strive 2.0.
And beyond that, each character has a move called the Force Function, a powerful attack that often has special properties to it, performed by hitting B and C at the same time.
Oh yeah.
But Force Function isn't free. It's a very powerful attack, so it does have a bill that you need to pay. However, to understand that, let's move up one more level. We have now entered the penthouse of the Under Night Mechanical Tower, or whatever the hell this metaphor was supposed to be. Time to talk about what makes Under Night, Under Night. Looking around this stage, you might have wondered, what exactly is that thing in the middle of the screen? This is the grind grid, and if you want to get good at Under Night, then this is going to be your best friend and your worst enemy. The grid fills up based upon essentially how well you play the game. If you move in on your opponent, the bar goes up. If you connect an attack, it goes up. If you get hit, it goes down. If you throw your opponent, it goes up. If you get thrown, it goes down. But if you tech a throw, then it goes way up. And most notably of all, if you successfully block an attack, then it will also go up. It's not uncommon for you to be in the lead, and then your opponent blocks a string of attacks, and now suddenly you've depleted your grid, and your opponent is at max.
I feel like this is quite a unique mechanic as well to Under Night, because at the very least, I haven't played another fighting game that has a bar that physically is there to tell you how well you're doing against your opponent. And it's really like a tug of war sort of game, because you both share the same meter. In other games for systems like this that I can think of, it's basically like, oh, your icon is now flashing, and now you can do a special move, or your moves gain special properties. But how you got into this mode is kind of a mystery, only to pro players who have played so much that they would recognize, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be in this mode now. Would they know that that's happening? But yeah, just having that visual representation to tell you how well you're doing, to confirm, to reaffirm that you've made the right decision, is really cool.
It's a pretty interesting idea. I will say I don't agree with every way that they judge this. Like, for example, if you backdash, it causes the grid to go down, and every time that happens, I think, wait, but sometimes backdashing is the right choice. Sometimes that's a good decision. Why do you always punish for that? But for the most part, it works pretty well, and unlike—
Interesting. I didn't realize that backdashing, you'd get punished for that. I suppose the way that they thought about it was they wanted to use this as a way to make players more aggressive, so that fights would be more exciting, and backdashing would be counter to that. But yeah, if you backdash like a grab or something, or you backdash and then whiff punish your opponent, that should be a reward. I wonder how you would code it though, if you were to try and like discourage players from playing lazy. Like, when would the game be able to identify that you're just running away from your opponent as opposed to backstepping in order to go back to neutral or in order to whip punish?
Like a lot of other games that have a system like this, the grind grid focuses a lot on defense, and that was by design. In an interview with tournament organizer and commentator Shinobi, Under Night's director Sarazawa said that he felt in air dashers, or anime fighters, or however you want to refer to this particular genre of fighting games, players just don't block. This is a genre that is definitely defined by an unga bunga mindset. But he thought being able to guard against a flurry of attacks was impressive, and a player should be rewarded for that. So they made guarding greatly increase your grid to place an importance on playing defensively. But there's another way to raise your grid, the D button. Yes, it's time to talk about the mythical 4th button.
I believe, well, at least in Under Night In-Birth 2, you could kind of just hold that and then you charge up your grid meter. So if your opponent was playing back and they didn't want to come at you, you could kind of just take that opportunity to raise up your meter. It's really a decision of, do I gain ground, do I try to threaten them in neutral, or do I simply increase my meter and force them to make a move?
The 4th button that doesn't attack. You can hold down the D button and you'll start charging your grid. You can also hit the D button and tap forward to do a short hop called the Assault, and you can use your Assault jump to maneuver around attacks at close range, get in on your opponent, and turn a normal attack into an overhead. Also,
not gonna lie, I kind of love the short hop button because before we played Under Night, I believe Kane and I were playing King of Fighters 15, and that was kind of the first game where we had 2 different types of jumps, being the short hop and then the regular jump. And you kind of just have to like time that, just know that you're tapping it in order to get a hop in, because it's way better if you're trying to hop in for an offense rather than a massive jump in to try an offense, because it takes so much time and your opponent is likely to counter you. But yeah, you don't have to worry about that when it comes to Under Night, because you can just press a button. Although I believe in City of the Wolves, you do have the 2 different types of hops, but you could hold another button. I forget what it's called, in order to make sure that it's a hop instead of a jump.
So you can hold back with the D button to create a shield, which will prevent chip damage from special moves. But if your opponent throws you while you have your shield up, or they hit you with a low while you're shielding high, then it will cause your grid to break. And now until it heals back, you can't use your Assault jump, your shield, and you can't charge your grid. And you'll notice that the grind grid is divided into
I think your force function as well, right?
And each time that you use your force function attack, it will drain your grid. And one thing that's pretty cool about this game is that if your grid is empty, you can still use your force function, but now it will give grid to your opponent. I think that's a pretty clever way to balance this all out. You want to use your force function, they don't want to keep you from using it, so if you don't have the resources, give those resources to your opponent. But that brings us to a very important question. What the hell is the grid, and why does it matter who has more of it? The grind grid is essentially a tug-of-war, because you'll notice that right there in the middle of the grid is a tiny ring that slowly fills up over time. And when enough time passes and that circle fills up, whoever has the most grids will go Vorpal. What does that mean?
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
No, seriously, when this game came out, nobody knew what it meant. One of the biggest critiques of the original release of Under Night is that it had so many detailed mechanics that got incredibly deep, and there was no tutorial in this game. Yeah, the folk of the French bread were very old school. If you want to...
Interesting. Because from my experience with Under Night In-Birth 2, it had one of the best tutorials that we've ever played so far in fighting games. So it's really funny to go back to like some of the first iterations and them having no tutorials. Just classic fighting games of press button, figure shit out. I've never really learned how to play a fighting game like that yet until, I guess, Soul Calibur. Now, this wasn't intentional. It was kind of because we didn't know where to find the tutorial in Soul Calibur. So that first stream, we ultimately ended up just trying to press buttons and seeing what happened and how they combined with each other, and just kind of learn how to play the game from that. But honestly, that was a really fun experience. In terms of Under Night, though, I can imagine that being a pretty big hurdle to get over. Because with Soul Calibur, it felt kind of intuitive. But with Under Night being an anime fighter, there's like so many systems that couldn't exactly be explained by just pressing buttons or like seeing what happened after you press the button. You just kind of have to guess. So yeah, in that regard, I think the game definitely needed a tutorial, or at least something to clarify what it means when text pops up on the screen.
To know how this game played, you had to read the booklet. What do you mean you bought this game digitally and it didn't come with a booklet? And it is not intuitive. It is not the kind of thing that you can just put your hands on and you'll figure it out after a few matches. It is incredibly detailed. In fact, you might think I've been explaining too much about this combat. I assure you,
not enough,
I am leaving out as much as I possibly can in order to make this video comprehensive.
Just the basics.
There are so many tiny exceptions and unique rules to everything that I'm talking about. You could write your thesis paper on the combat of Under Night. But here goes. What is Vorpal? Once that timer runs out and you go Vorpal, as signaled by this blue aura that appears around your character, you'll receive a 10% increase in your damage. You'll also gain access to a handful of new moves, such as the ability to sacrifice your Vorpal in order to knock an opponent off of you while you're blocking. But most importantly, it gives you access to Chain Shift. You can perform Chain Shift by double tapping the D button while in Vorpal, and this does two things. First, it sacrifices how many grids you've built up and it transfers them into your Exis meter. So you can use half your Exis meter on an EX move, activate Chain Shift, and then you'll get all that meter back. But if you activate Chain Shift in the middle of a combo, it will cancel that attack and freeze the screen for a moment, turning this into a Guilty Gear style Roman cancel, meaning you can start up a combo.
Oh yeah. I don't know if I said that, but yeah, it's basically a Roman cancel. It's a get into Vorpal, do a combo. If it's unsafe, then you chain shift out of it. If you do land a hit, then you can chain shift in order to continue your combo and gain way more advantage. It's a cool mechanic, and if you master it, then you definitely want to be winning grid or Vorpal every single time.
Combo, get to the very end of it, chain shift, get all your meter back, and then start that combo all over again. With all the power-ups and tools that Vorpal gives you, there is a reason this is what Under Night's entire combat revolves around.
And you're already doing more damage,
too. The start of each match is a battle to see who can get Vorpal first, and then it becomes a fight to see who can steal it back before the timer resets. And it makes every match so incredibly tense. I would constantly be darting my eyes down to the bottom of the screen to see how many grids I had and how much time was left until Vorpal hit. Seeing both of our meters being so close to each other and knowing that every single decision would change who got this power-up forces you to think fast and adjust on the fly, and you can fill your grid up or destroy your opponent's grid in a second, meaning even if you're way behind, there's always a chance to turn things around. One of the most important things in a fighting game is that back and forth, that feeling that power and advantage can change between you and your opponent at any moment. And
oh yeah, 100%. The most fun I ever have playing fighting games is when Kane and I are at a level of neither of us know what we're doing, so we're both playing on a very even playing field. It's anybody's game at that point. That back and forth is the entire reason why you play fighting games.
Vorpal is a mechanic built specifically to create that feeling, and it isn't like anything else that I can think of in a fighting game. I said that French Bread ran into a lot of problems with the early builds of this game because honestly, they were just trying too many new things and they didn't work. But that crazy inventive spirit of theirs actually hit a home run on this one. This is where all that experimentation paid off big time because I cannot picture this game without the Vorpal mechanic. And what's crazy is, that's not even the only power-up this game comes with. If your Exis meter is more than halfway full, you can hit A, B, and C and you'll activate Veil Off. In this mode, your Exis slowly decreases, but until it runs out, your attack is increased by 20%, and yes, that does stack with Vorpal. So if you have Vorpal and Veil Off, you are going to be doing 30% more damage. But also while you're in this mode, you can use your EX moves and supers, and they'll eat up far less of your meter. So if your Exis is full, you can go Veil Off, use an EX move, use another EX move, and then finish it off with your big super. There is so much that you can do in this game, so much creativity and experimentation. It is wild how detailed the combat in this game is. However, as I said, one of the great things about Under Night isn't that it's complex. It's that it's complex if you want it to be.
Yeah, you just run up to an auto combo. You can still win that way very easily, actually. As long as you have good fundamentals in fighting games, you block, you attack when your opponent is negative, and then yeah, you can just win.
That complexity has a range to it. Did your mind melt when I went into all the different uses of Vorpal? Then don't worry about it. A, B, and C. That's all you need to know to start.
Well, honestly, you don't even need to use any of the Veil Off stuff either. You can play just fine by using your supers and using your EXs. Now, obviously, using the Veil Off at the right time could be way more advantageous, but I also feel like it's a mechanic where it's more so dependent on your play style. Like, how risky you want to be with things.
Congrats! You hit those 3 buttons and you just did a 3-hit combo. Oh, did you get Vorpal, but you can't remember all the different things that I said it does? Then don't worry about it. It's giving you a 10% damage buff without you having to do anything else.
That actually reminds me of why, Giovanna is such a great beginner character in Guilty Gear Strive, because I believe when her super meter is full, she basically goes Super Saiyan and she does more damage. And that's kind of like a common problem with people who are new to fighting games. Well, this is still a problem with me too. But sometimes you forget about your super meter, and you don't really know when to spend it, or honestly, for completely new people, how to spend it. So even without that, if you're playing somebody like Giovanna, you're still benefiting from the fact that you have super meter without having to actually use your super.
Just keep doing those simple 3-hit combos, and Vorpal's still giving you a buff. Keep it up, and when you're comfortable with it, you can try and learn something else. I outlined multiple layers of difficulty that this game comes with, but the way that Under Night is able to just ease players through each of those levels is genius. However, one of the things that makes Under Night so unique is that if you heard everything that I just said, and you look at this art style, and you think about these developers' track record, you're probably expecting this to be some big, high-flying, over-the-top slugfest. Except it really isn't. I already mentioned with the grind grid, they wanted to place an importance on defense because they felt most so-called anime fighters were too aggressive. But also, Melty Blood was known for its insane levels of aerial maneuverability. The moment you pop your opponent into the air, you were not coming down. So French Bread made a conscious decision with Under Night to make it far more grounded. They wanted it to be more of a footsie-heavy game about feeling your opponents out rather than another high-flying game where characters were just zipping all over the screen.
Interesting. That... I can't really come up with a comparison because we still have yet to try out Melty Blood. That is a game that we do think that we're going to try out in the future, though, so maybe I'll have some more opinions about that when we get there. I will say, though, that I didn't really feel the need to, like, air dash into my opponent as much in this game. But I'm not sure if that's just because, I'm inexperienced, I didn't notice the timing, or Kane was just mostly doing that and I was just anti-airing him for the game.
In fact, in the EXE Late Edition, they even add more anti-air moves specifically to make sure that people sat their butts down and stayed on the ground. And because of that, It makes Under Night something really different. It's got incredible speed, running and jumping feels so quick and smooth, and yet you're not flying all over the screen. You are still largely planted on the ground the whole time, making this a game where one moment you'll be pulling off a big combo that keeps going on, and then you Roman cancel, and you keep it going, and you're popping each other into the air with wall bounces and OTGs, and you're just doing the biggest, craziest things you can imagine. But then the next moment, you and your opponent are shimmying back and forth,
just
playing footsies, looking to get a poke in, and studying up on your fundamentals. And because of that, the FGC has come to largely refer to Under Night as Anime Street Fighter. Which is weird because I thought the alpha games were Anime Street Fighter, but I get your point. And I love that the game's director, Kamone Serizawa, was told that the FGC calls it Anime Street Fighter, and he takes that as a compliment. He's proud of it. It's kind of exactly what he wanted. So
yeah, I mean, if that's how they designed it, that's probably what they were inspired by, to be honest.
The game was now on home consoles, and over the course of several patches, they had heavily retooled it to make it more balanced. Serizawa said that his biggest regret with the original release of the game was, quote, combos could be chained together more than we had anticipated. Which is maybe the nicest way I've ever heard anyone say, the infinites. We didn't plan on the infinites. But he also regretted how high the damage was, so they shortened combos, gave characters more opportunities to recover to keep them from being juggled continuously, and they severely reduced the damage. In other words,
I wonder, I guess reducing the damage means that there's more exchanges between you and your opponent? So you could definitely see that as a good thing, that both of you get to play more during a particular match. But I also think that high damage games can also be quite fun because of the amount of tension with each single exchange that you have between you and your opponent. I think both have their benefits, but ultimately it's up to what the vision for the game is from the developer.
The game was finally shaping into something playable, something fun, something that could really grab players' attention. But that's not all the Uniel version of this game added. It also came with 4 brand new characters. There's Amnesia's chief strategist, Chaos. Chaos was an intellectual obsessed with studying the night, and after gaining the power to bring books to life, he stole an ancient tome from Lich Christ known as the Chaos Code. Yes, the guy named Chaos found a book called the Chaos Code. It's almost like it was made for him. He now uses his powers and this book to summon out a giant beast called Ajidaka, which means that Chaos is our first true puppet fighter, attacking alongside Ajidaka to confuse and overwhelm the opponent. Chaos is known for his hostility and cold nature. He constantly talks crap to everybody and views everyone else as an idiot who is beneath him. Except for Gordeau! Yeah, he actually gets super buddy-buddy with his fellow Amnesia agent. His personality changes so much around Gordeau, it's kinda jarring. Next up is Nanase. She's a young girl who wandered into the night looking to get revenge against her fellow classmate, Hyde. Why does she want revenge on him? Well, because according to Nanase, Hyde is a pervert who, and I am quoting here, I cannot stress that enough.
What?
Quote, defiled her body. Okay. This looks bad.
Well, what the fuck? You can't go around saying shit like that without any evidence. I definitely didn't do that. From what Chad told me, I believe Nanase was just like the character that crushes on Hyde, essentially. The common anime trope.
But when you get to the end of her arcade lair, you find out that the reason why she thinks Hyde is a pervert is because she constantly sees him hanging out with Lene, and she assumes that he is taking advantage of this young girl. And when she says he, quote, defiled her body, what she means is she stumbled into the Hollow Knight, found Hyde in there, and was attacked by a void, turning her into an inbirth. Okay,
What?
a few things.
Why
One,
did you
I know it's
word it
traditional
like
to have
that?
plots where some kind of a miscommunication leads to wacky hijinks and misunderstandings, but not to say there was seriously no other way that you could have phrased that. That might
Right?
be the worst possible way to say, I got superpowers. And two, Nanase has the power to control the wind. I could understand being pissed if you mutate into a giant monster, but out of all the X-Men you could have turned into, Storm is not a bad option. You kind of won the
Honestly,
lottery
yeah.
on that one. So yeah, in case you can't tell, I'm not the biggest fan of Nanase's character. However, mechanically speaking, she's actually
Really
a ton
fun.
of fun. Very
Yeah.
agile and quick. She can set up attacks to cover her as she goes in. She's great. I actually think she's one of the best designed characters in this installment.
I know that there were quite a few people actually during the streams who were Nanase mains and were cheering for me to play Nanase. Didn't really click with me, but I can certainly understand how the character could be a lot of fun. And there's a lot of intricacies, I suppose, to like her kit and how you'd go about approaching your opponent, and definitely a lot of matchup knowledge in there as well. Just overall, really fun and unique character within the roster, which, well, you could say that about basically everybody here.
Our next fighter is Byakuya. His power comes in the form of spider legs that poke out of his back, and these
Spider.
give him some good reach and specials that combo together incredibly well.
Okay, what's Byakuya's whole deal with his sister? I think this guy is a bit creepy in that regard.
But his ultimate tool is his webbing. Byakuya tends to be pretty top tier, and it's because he can set up webbing all over the stage that he can use to quickly jump around and also trap the opponent if they happen to get too close to it.
Oh yeah, you see a lot of Byakuya in pro play. Basically force your opponent into doing exactly what you want. Whenever you can set them up into the corner and then set up like 3 of your webs.
A high-level Byakuya can keep you from even being able to move.
Yeah.
Now, as for Byakuya's backstory, he's a young boy who was in love with Tsukuyomi, his sister.
There you go.
You mean it was like a familial kind of love? Like they were just
No,
really
no, I
close
don't
as
think
a
so.
family? No. No,
Oh
I
my.
don't mean that. I mean his entire room is covered in swimsuit photos of her. And if I can take a moment to editorialize real quick, ew. Yeah, he is obsessed with her. Every single thing that he says is about his sister. But then one day, she dies, and Byakuya is overwhelmed with despair.
Oh yeah, it was really fucked up when we learned about it. It's also kind of funny too, because I think the girl that's with him isn't his sister, just some random girl who happens to look like her, I think. So then he just kind of takes her and brings her along, and she kind of has to agree because she wants to get out of the night. She doesn't want to be here.
Starts aimlessly wandering around the town until he ends up walking into the night and being attacked by voids. Now, you might think, wait, his sister died? Then who is that in his intro and outros?
Random
Did
girl?
she somehow come back to life? Nope, because that isn't his sister. That's a woman named Strix, who was a member of Ogre's gang. Yeah, remember
Oh.
them from way back in the beginning?
Didn't know that.
She was an inbirth with the power to enhance other people's powers, and because of that, she served as Ogre's right hand. Up until Ogre was defeated and fell into the abyss in his fight with Amnesia. But as Strix was escaping, she was confronted by her friend and fellow gang member, Zohar. Zohar was slowly being corrupted by the abyss as well, causing her to go mad. She attacked Strix, damaging her body and weakening her powers, because as I mentioned earlier, inbirths' bodies don't work like normal human bodies, they're basically vessels that contain their powers. So if you damage them, then they can start to lose those powers, they can begin to leak out of them. It's complicated, but it does play into the plot. Well, Byakuya has been exploring the night in the hopes that his sister might be alive and somewhere inside of it. And Strix has been exploring the night in the hopes of finding her friend Zohar so that way she can fight her, damage her body, and drain her powers, thereby freeing Zohar from the corruption of the Abyss. Essentially, Zohar is full of too much Abyss energy and Strix wants to poke a hole in her to let the bad vibes out. Well, one night Byakuya sees Strix and notices that she looks just like his sister. The two of them begin to talk and Strix realizes she can't fight, she can just make other people stronger. So, the two of them strike a deal. Byakuya will accompany Strix to find Zohar and defeat her, and in return, Strix will dress and act like his sister.
Yeah.
This might be the least healthy relationship I have ever covered in a game. Someone call up one of those psychologist react channels and tell them to check out the characters of Under Night. I think all these people need professional help. And then our final character is actually a guest character. Akatsuki from Akatsuki Blitzkampf. It's that game with the tank. Yeah, there you go, Akatsuki Blitzkampf.
Damn,
You all know it.
physics.
Akatsuki Blitzkampf is a smaller game that never really left Japan, but the people who have played it swear by it. They rave about its simple and refined combat that feels like a perfect tribute to classic grounded games of the 90s. If you want to know more about it, again, Gao Win Quotes did a video on it, totally worth checking it out. Now, Akatsuki joined this game because everyone at French Bread were big fans of Akatsuki Blitzkampf. They even say that game inspired them to add a quick rematch feature to this game, which is kind of odd that you needed someone to tell you to add an instant rematch option.
Right.
But the team behind Akatsuki Blitzkampf...
Although, to be fair, even modern games made nowadays don't even have, like, the simplest things in them that you would expect from those type of games. It's maddening how we haven't figured this shit out yet.
also started out in Dojin circles. That's how these developers originally met, and that team even helped French Bread with the sprite work for the original Under Night release. So this partnership came pretty naturally. In fact, the Akatsuki devs even gave French Bread some of the raw sprites from their game to copy for his moveset. Also, while we're on the topic, another reason why Akatsuki was included in this game is because Narita is a huge fan of guest characters. He wanted to add even more into this game. And the number one game that he wanted a guest character from? Skullgirls. Yeah, not Street Fighter or Fatal Fury or any of those other games that...
Hey, you know, his favorites. I can respect that. Skullgirls is another game that we're definitely gonna have to try, because the art style for that seems immaculate.
he say inspired him. No, the number one game that he wanted a guest character from was another small indie game from the other side of the planet. They never got that Skullgirls guest character, but they did get some bonus art for the home release of the game from the Skullgirl devs.
Oh, cool.
So that's kind of nice. Now, as for who the heck Akatsuki is, he's essentially Japanese Steve Rogers. He was a soldier in World War II, signed up for an experiment to turn him into a super soldier, then he got frozen and thawed out in the modern day. Now, I'll be honest with you, I've never played Akatsuki Blitzkampf, so I can't speak to how he plays compared
I can't say either, but I kind of like him. He's very simple. He's very straightforward. He feels like just a nice dude who gets put into these horrible, horrible situations. And then he just has to fight his way out. I also think his gameplay really fits him, as in, like, it fits his personality to a T. Akatsuki, he basically plays like classic Punch Man, and he's very straightforward in his approach. He doesn't have any tricky tools that he can use. He plays a good and honest fighting game. And you know what? I respect the heck out of it.
to his original game. But just speaking of his appearance in here, I think Akatsuki is great. He's an insanely strong Shoto with some really powerful attacks. And personality-wise, he just feels like a good dude. And I'm glad that we got that because, mechanically speaking, I think all 4 characters added to the home release were great. But personality-wise, yeah, each of them were a little problematic. But Akatsuki, hey, you don't have to worry about that with this guy. He's a good dude.
He's here
a
to
soldier.
do good.
He fought during World War II.
Is
If he fought for Japan during World War II, then doesn't that mean that he fought on the side of...
There is that. But it's okay.
Okay,
You know, it's
so
fine. It's
after some
Akatsuki.
real quick research, I can say that Akatsuki Blitzkampf takes place in an alternate history, so it wasn't actually World War II, even though it kind of resembles it in a lot of ways. But even if it was, he still rebelled against his own army in that game, so he's not on the side of the bad guys. Let's stop talking about this now. It's getting really uncomfortable. We will not be doing an Akatsuki Blitzkampf retrospective anytime soon. So, Under Night was on home consoles, it was available worldwide, which raises the question, how was it received? Well, I'm not going to lie, it didn't exactly catch on with casual audiences. I mean, only the most diehard fighting game players even knew this game existed. However, among that audience, yeah, it did pretty well. And I think French Bread realized that's who their target audience would be.
Yeah, I feel like, well, I have heard of a lot of the fighting games that we tried out so far. I didn't hear about Under Night In-Birth until a lot more recently, when it's getting featured on the main stage of Evo and stuff like that. Plus, obviously, us getting into Anime Fighters and Guilty Gear, and you guys start to recommend things from the comment section, then that's how I learned about it. It's not one of those household names, let's say, especially not in the West. And honestly, I can't really say about here in Southeast Asia because I don't touch grass. But maybe there are some people talking about it. No, think about it. I don't even know what like the most popular fighting game here is in Thailand. Yeah, I just have no clue.
Because I mentioned how complex the combat of this game was, and that's kind of rare for a brand new fighting game. Normally a brand new title will start off small and simple and then add more complexity as later versions of the game come out.
Oh yeah, that is basically what BlazBlue did, right? We started off with more beginner, easier to understand mechanics, and slowly evolve the gameplay from there with each new version.
Under Night, on the other hand, just threw 20 made-up words at your feet and said, "Hey, good luck with that." But Kamoni Sarazala said that the game needed that complexity. Remember, he came from the world of competitive fighters, and in that interview with Shinobi that I mentioned earlier, he said if they don't make the game complex enough, then the competitive audience will get bored with it. Which, yeah, is kind of a smart strategy. I mean, most fighting games tend to aim themselves at casual audiences because those audiences are far larger. However, those audiences typically also want tons of content and cutting-edge graphics, and
not
all of
something
that
you can
costs
provide.
money that French Bread didn't have. However, the competitive audience cares far more about the actual combat of the game, and they tend to be far more dedicated, more loyal to a game. If they find a game that they like, they will stick with it for years. So,
oh yeah, it's like, well, to bring it to something I'm a lot more familiar with, it's like if you're starting a YouTube channel and you try to do like the mass appeal type of content, but you're just not as good as everybody else who does the mass appeal type of content because, quite frankly, you don't have the funds, nor the popularity, nor the numbers. It's just not gonna work out for you. You gotta start off niche in a community that you're familiar with, you know what they want, and you can talk to them, and just provide the things that they want, and slowly expand from there. If things catch on, then maybe you can get to that level, but for the most part, you gotta find your core audience. And it's really no different when you're a game developer trying to develop an indie game. You don't have all the funds, but you do have an idea and you have a passion, and you need to find the people who have that same passion as you do.
Sarazala realized if they couldn't get that big casual audience, then they needed to aim for the competitive crowd. And that gamble paid off. The competitive audience for this game started off small, but it quickly began to grow. Players were loving that this game had the speed of an air dasher, but had the grounded gameplay of a more traditional fighter. It was a game of inches that played like you were moving at miles. And the Vorpal system provided players with a secondary mind game unlike anything else. It felt like a game of chess and a game of checkers at the exact same time. Don't get me wrong, it still had problems. Damage was still really high, Waldstein still had an infinite, and it was incredibly unbalanced. However, it was the originality of the game that kept bringing players in. There's a great little documentary that Holdback to Block did on how the community for this game rose up over years called Long Live the Night, and I highly recommend checking it out. I'll be linking it in the card that's popping up right here. But essentially, this became a real grassroots push. This community grew up from one player to another, one Discord group at a time. When major tournaments refused to let Unial in, these players started organizing around smaller venues. The Unial community was basically like old-timey salesmen, just loading up in their trucks and traveling across the country from town to town. And after spending years pushing this game ahead inch by inch, this community was finally about to get the big boost that it had been waiting for.
The predator that roams the night. Yeah. Oh, phone off. Was phone already in the game? Or is this where she gets introduced?
After the last version of Under Night, the game started to grow. More eyes were being put on French bread, not just from players, but from other companies as well. Thanks to the success of their original title, they were hired by Sega to make the fighting game Dengeki Bunko Fighting Climax, a crossover that would bring together various characters from Dengeki Bunko light novels. And considering they said they wanted Under Night to be, quote, a light novel fighting game, this feels rather appropriate. Also, I'd like to remind everyone, the entire reason they started working on Under Night was because no other studio would hire them. So to now have Sega knocking on their door asking them for help shows what an impact Under Night made. And thanks to all this success, the next version of Under Night was about to see its biggest update yet. Releasing in arcades in July 2015, on consoles in Japan in July 2017, and in the rest of the world in February 2018, this was Under Night In-Birth EXE Latest, abbreviated to UNIST. And this was the big kick that Under Night was waiting for. Not only did this game serve as the perfect jumping on point for any player who had spent the last 2 years hearing people talk about this title, but also mechanically, this game refined itself so much. It plays immensely better than the previous version. In fact, this was the version of the game that I started with, and going back to Uniel felt like I was playing in mud. Don't get me wrong, Uniel is still a good game, but UNIST just does everything better. First up, the damage is reduced, addressing one of the biggest complaints that players had, while making the combat more aggressive. Yes, I know that French Bread wanted this to be a game that focused more on defense, but maybe they leaned into that a bit much. The balance between offense and defense in this game feels much better. Plus, there were multiple characters.
I mean, fully defensive gameplay, not exactly the most exciting thing out there. I can see it from that angle.
In the previous version who felt broken, they were just way too strong. So making each character more aggressive made it easier to get in on those fighters and turn the table on them. There were also a handful of new mechanics introduced, and each of them were huge improvements for the game. You still had your normal veil off, but now when you were doing a combo, you could hit all 3 of your attack buttons at once to do cross-cast veil off. Crosscast, just like Chain Shift, will reset your combo, but you can then immediately hit all 3 buttons again to activate your big super. And it feels amazing ending a combo like this. I found myself constantly breaking this move out even when I didn't need to, just because it was so cool. But if you ask me, the most important update that this version of the game made is that now when you go into Vorpal, every single character gets some kind of a buff that's unique just to them. I've heard some people say that there were always character-specific buffs to Vorpal, but not like this there weren't. Now when you go into Vorpal, every single character will either get a brand new move, or their pre-existing moves will have different properties to them that have tons of new potential behind them, and these moves feel perfect. Not only are they powerful, but they're also distinct enough that even if you're unaware that this is a thing, you'll be able to instantly tell, oh, this is different now. The moment I go into Vorpal, suddenly I can do things I could not do before. For example, Aurier's force function is a flip that helps her to get over your opponent. But when you're in Vorpal, you can now do 2 of those flips at once. Gordeau's force function is a claw slash that can crumple your opponent. But when you're in Vorpal, the startup time is faster and the range is longer. Merkaba has a move where he plants a little tiny mini monster on the ground that starts jumping around to attack you. But if he gets hit, it'll disappear. But now in this installment, if he's in Vorpal, then he can get hit while blocking, and it won't affect his little monster sidekick. You can now plant one of these down, start blocking, and while your opponent is trying to get through your defenses, your little monster buddy there will do all the attacking for you. Waldstein's force function lets him pull a chunk of the ground up and throw it at the opponent. A helpful tool for a big bulky character like him. You know what's even more helpful? When you go into Vorpal, and now that projectile causes a wall bounce that can easily be comboed into further attacks. These are wonderful additions.
That's
Vorpal was already a
sexy.
good buff in the previous games, but now when you enter it, it feels like you got a brand new character. And hey, best of all, this installment actually fixed one of the biggest problems with all the mechanics in the game. They finally explained all the mechanics in the game.
Buddy.
Yes, this version had a tutorial, and normally I wouldn't stop to point out a tutorial, but Under Night's tutorial is legendary. It's one of the biggest, longest, most in-depth tutorials in any fighting game ever.
Really? And this is Thorgi saying this. Thorgi has way more experience with fighting games than I ever probably will. But yeah, going back to an earlier comment that I made in, I believe, the last part, where Kane was talking about how when he was doing this tutorial, it really felt like instead of just explaining step 1 and then step 2, they also explained the half step in between those steps. And I'm really glad that they did. I'm glad that there's a tutorial out there that truly explains how to play a fighting game to people who are completely new. I just wish more fighting games out there had something as complete as this. But also, it's such a massive change from the previous game having no tutorial to having the best tutorial. Or I suppose best is kind of relative. Let's say the most detailed one that we've seen so far.
How big is it?
We explained everything.
Pretty damn big. And it goes into even the tiniest details. I've been playing this game for about 6 years now, and I still learned stuff from going through this tutorial I had never even heard anyone mention. What do you mean I can cancel my opponent's Vorpal with a veil off? Since when was that a thing? These tutorials make you realize there is a depth to this combat that you're not going to appreciate from just picking it up and pressing buttons. But that wasn't the biggest addition to this version. No, after throwing a mountain of lore at players with no explanation, they finally included a story mode. Kind of. It's called Chronicles mode, and this is essentially the novelization of Under Night. There's no combat, you're just reading the backstory of each character, and it is helpful to learning more about them and this world.
I mean, that's cool.
But holy crap, this thing drags. Listen, I know a lot of light novel and visual novels love to embellish and monologue, but even by those standards, this one just keeps going and going and going. Each character's prequel is...
I think there's definitely an art to creating like a visual novel when it comes down to the language that you use and really how compelling it is that you're presenting your narrative. Like there are some visual novels I can play, like particular chapters in say something like Arknights, where it really just has me hooked because of, well, the language, the way that it's being told, and all the other elements that come along with it. That just makes it so much more engaging than, let's say, a lot of other visual novels that are pretty well known, pretty popular, but they're also super incredibly long that you kind of hesitate to recommend it to anybody. Because if they're not into it, then they're basically going to be sitting through like 100 or 200 episodes of an anime they didn't want to watch. That's really tough to achieve. Plus, it's not always going to work for everybody. It's kind of a risk, something that you kind of have to need to get more experience on, I think.
About an hour long, and they could easily be half that. We did a retrospective on BlazBlue, and I went through every single inch of those games. So I'm used to these big, over-the-top, massive story modes. But typically in these stories, the plot actually,
go somewhere,
moves ahead.
Yeah.
Things are happening. A huge chunk of these chronicles are just characters thinking to themselves, contemplating what just happened or what's about to happen. And I understand that can be a good way to reveal insight into a character's personality, but they go way too far with it. The plot does not move enough to warrant this length. And I feel
Yeah, that's another point. As in, like, this is a good thing, but too much of that is not good. You need to find a way to convey all of this as concisely as possible. You can do this in many different ways by having lines of dialogue that imply things about a character. And through that, your reader can then finish the sentence, right? They can finish an entire essay about the character because of something that they did, like a facial expression that they did, just a way that they approached a problem. You can infer these things instead of having to explain all of it. It's something you'll see a lot in like really good movies, especially character-based ones. You just understand a character without them having to tell you about that character.
So bad for the translators on this game because you can tell that having to do this massive story mode was definitely pushing them to their limits, because there are spelling errors all over the place in this thing. And normally I wouldn't stop to point something like that out, but every single time that I ran to a new one, all I could do was think, man, these poor translators did not sign up for this.
Yeah.
When they heard they were working on a fighting game, they did not think they were going to have to translate a novel. Listen, if I'm saying something is long-winded, you know it's a problem. However, I do have to give it credit for a few things. For starters, this game wanted to give you an understanding of these characters, and yeah, it does that alright. You will now understand these fighters inside and out, as well as future fighters. It's actually pretty impressive how much this team thought out this cast, because there are so many times that brand new characters pop up in this story, and I thought,
Thorgi and Phonon, yeah.
I know them! They got added to this game like 3 years down the road. In fact, that's been true since the start. In the very opening to the arcade release of the very first game, there are silhouettes of characters who wouldn't be added until 8 years later. I think that's pretty cool that this team was thinking that far into the future about a game they weren't even sure would sell. But speaking of those new characters, there were 4 added to this version of the game.
Let's go.
First up is Enkidu. He's another member of Amnesia, although he isn't there because he's friends with the rest of them or because he cares about their big power grab.
That's a good fight.
No, he's just there because he wants to fight strong opponents, and Amnesia told him they could make that happen. In fact, while Enkidu is an in-birth, his actual powers are pretty small. This dude fights mostly just with his actual raw physical power. And if you're just getting into the game, he is incredibly new player friendly. Not only does he hit like a truck, but his basic combos are some of the easiest in the game to learn. He can link his B attacks into other B attacks and his C attacks into other C attacks. So you can do a big combo by hitting A, B, 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 C, C, C. You want a character that makes you feel really strong but is not that hard to figure out? You pick Enkidu. Next, after all,
pretty simple, at least execution-wise. So I do understand the beginner recommendation in that aspect, but from my understanding, I've heard that he kind of struggles in like more moderate to higher levels of play because, well, quite frankly, he's got to be a lot slower than other people, so other characters or other players will just kind of abuse that fact. Plus, I think he doesn't have that many great tools in neutral, so he's got to kind of fight his way towards his opponent. But, I mean, you could say the same thing about Akatsuki as well. But, I guess personally, I'd say Akatsuki might be better as like a beginner character because he has a fireball.
All this time, we finally got some new members of Lich Christ. First is Mika. She's an upbeat, hyperactive girl who is friends with Aurier, but her impulsive attitude often gets her into trouble. She's got super strength and a pair of giant gauntlets that let her fly across the stage, smashing into the opponent or leaping in close to grab them. At release, Mika was very strong. At least that's what the developers thought, because remember how I said each character got brand new abilities when they go Vorpal? Well, that wasn't true for Mika, because they thought that she was already so strong she should get an additional bonus. I mean, she can still use Chain Shift and she still gets the 10% damage boost, but that's it, nothing else. I've seen a lot of devs over the years struggle to try and balance their characters, but it's rare that you see them throw their hands up in the air and say, dude, I don't know, just don't give her that thing and hope it all works out. French bread, they're trying their best. Then there's Wagner. She's one of the top soldiers for Lich Christ with unparalleled power, and she knows it. Yeah, Wagner comes from a long line of high-ranking Lich Christ members, and she's got all the ego that a lineage like that could bring.
Oh yeah, what is that move again? The white woman low kick or something like that? Wagner has it.
At least on the surface. Underneath it all, she's a bit more reserved. As for how she fights, Wagner uses flame-based attacks that often link together to help her move across the stage very quickly. When you watch a really good player on Wagner, you'll see them going corner to corner like they're taking a Sunday stroll, because Wagner just has so many ways to keep linking her moves together. Then the last brand new character is also our first exposure to a totally new team in the Undernight world. Phonon is a cold, serious woman with a long, snake-like whip that she uses to lash out punishment as she laughs wickedly at her opponents, reveling in how strong
that's not her at all.
Or at least that's what she wants you to think. Yeah, Phonon talks a good game when she's up against her opponent. She's laughing and saying how she'll destroy them with her whip. But on the inside, she's a sweating, anxious mess. Something is up with this character. But when she gets to the end of her arcade ladder, she runs into her classmate Nanase, who just says, "Oh, hey, Yoshiko." What? Yoshiko? That's not my name. I'm Phonon. Phonon? Wait. You mean like that character in that anime?
Yeah.
Yeah. I watched that when I was a kid. It was okay. And that's when I realized, wait, Phonon is just a big nerd pretending to be cool? And yeah, after that, I kind of love this character. Listen, I got a soft spot for dorks trying to act like they know what they're doing. I built my entire channel around it. So...
Same, bro, same. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing 5 years in. Who knows? I make video that I think is fun, and hopefully it works out. But yeah, like, I've never really been into the super long-range characters. Phonon was kind of fun to play, but I decided not to, simply because she has this, like, low attack that goes almost full screen. And I knew for a fact that if I mained Phonon, I would abuse the shit out of that. Because I don't think Kane would be able to block that consistently. Not gonna lie. Like, not to talk shit about Kane or anything, but I'm just saying it probably would have been quite annoying to have to deal with that.
Oh, who is Phonon actually? She was an aspiring writer who loved the supernatural, so she began investigating this mysterious knight that she had been hearing about, only to get attacked by a void. She survived and was taken in by a group called the EFG, the Existence Force Guardians. They're a group of students who all awaken their in-birth powers and are taking it upon themselves to protect everyone from the night. They gave Phonon some combat training and taught her how to use her new sound-based powers, so that way she could become another heroic member of the EFG. But Phonon didn't really care about any of that. Instead, she just said, wait, I got superpowers? And once a month, a bunch of in-births get together and fight each other in the night? Oh, hell yeah! See ya, losers! Thanks for all the training. Now lose my number. Don't ever call me again. Bye! You remember how I said they wanted to give this game a Chunibyo style? Phonon is all about that. She's a teen who got superpowers and decided to live out her power fantasies. As for how she fights, well, she's got a whip and sound-based projectiles, so you're probably assuming that she's a zoner, and yeah, there's definitely some of that in there. But Under Night is a game that loves to keep popping your opponents back up into the air, and with Phonon's reach, she is all about that. She might as well join the circus because she is a juggler. And in case you're wondering why her whip is alive, that's because when the EFG found her, they gave her a void fragment. Which is exactly what it sounds like. It's just a chunk of a void. And when an in-birth touches a void fragment, they can turn it into a weapon. And for Phonon, this girl who wants to be a tough badass, her fragment turned into an adorable snake named Muniel that likes to say its own name like a Pokemon. Now, one more thing that I should bring up, Phonon was in the original pitch for this game, and boy, if you think Lene and Hyde changed a lot from their initial pitch, get a load of this. Originally, Phonon was going to be a character named Chimidi. She would be sadistic and fight with a whip, but she would also be kind of blind. She would have really poor eyesight, but she would have great hearing, so she would use that to fight. But the biggest change of all is that originally, she was going to be Gordeau's sister. But Gordeau also originally fought with a whip, and then they decided to give him a scythe, so then they decided that didn't really make sense for the two of them to be siblings, because I guess in this world, siblings all use the same weapons. So yeah, long story short, that idea got thrown out. But to this day, whenever the French-bred developers take questions on Under Night, they still get asked questions about whether or not Chimidi could get turned into an original character and brought back. So as I said, between the changes to the combat, the new characters, the new modes, this was the biggest update.
With the new character that was recently announced for Under Night In-Birth 2, like, I don't know anything about the outline or who that could potentially be, but I'm just kind of like looking out throughout this retrospective to see if there's a character that shows up here in the background that it might be. Perhaps we've already seen them, but I just didn't recognize it. Or potentially like one of these older concepts that was reused and turned into something new for Under Night In-Birth 2. That being said, if any of you guys watching this know more details about the new character that was announced, I'd love to hear it. Or even the fact that you guys don't know is probably good enough for me. Because I guess then that would basically confirm it's a completely new character.
That Under Night had gotten so far, and it paid off. Not only did this game reach a much larger audience, but as I mentioned, the combat was just so much better. Before this, even the people who were enjoying Under Night would gladly admit it had some problems. But now this was a game that felt like it could stand side by side with its top competitors. and when you looked at the tournament scenes, you could see its reach growing. In 2018, a brand new tournament started up in Atlanta, Georgia, that would specifically focus on French-bred fighters like Melty Blood, Dengeki Bunko, and of course, Under Night. This was Climax of Night, and over 7 years, this served as the biggest celebration of all things French-bred, and eventually grew to include multiple smaller fan-favorite fighters like Akatsuki Blitzkampf, Skullgirls, Darkstalkers, and of course, Sailor Moon S.
Yeah!
The real ones understand. This became a major tournament across America, and it all started because these French-bred games were speaking to an audience. Unfortunately, 2025 was its last year, but not because of a lack of attendance. No, instead, it was because of very understandable issues with money and time. Two things that running a tournament require massive amounts of. According to tournament organizer Shinobi, quote, "It was a mixture of things, but the most prominent ones were money and fulfillment. Even if I had unlimited money, CON wouldn't have been around much longer. I'm extremely proud of that body of work and all the friends that helped me along the way. The French-bred community is now stronger than ever."
That is completely understandable. Even with unlimited money, if your heart's not in it, then you just can't keep on doing it. Sometimes you just gotta take a break. Even if it's something that you love, can't do it forever. And honestly, that's why I'm like so open-minded towards checking out new things. Because I think if I made a YouTube channel that's specifically only about one subject, I would be so bored out of my mind. And I don't understand how the people who do that are able to just do that. I guess they kind of view the YouTube channel as like just a business. Like I go to work in order to talk about this particular thing, and then everything else I just do on my own. I can kind of see it that way, but at least for me, the YouTube channel is like, well, it's kind of me. This is an expression of myself, so I want to learn about a lot of new things. That's why our content is so varied. And that variety is really the spice of life, because it's what has kept me going all this time.
And he's right. Doing this retrospective and going through Under Night's history, it is incredible watching how this entire company and their player base have exploded and continue to grow with every single year. I mean, speaking of Climax of Night, this was it in its first year. This was it in its last. And I honestly can't think of a better visual indicator of how this player base has grown. And speaking of growing, in 2019, after years of pushing for it, Under Night was added to the biggest stage in the world. And became a featured game at EVO, giving it the most attention this game has ever gotten. And with this rush of new players joining the night, what did Frenchbred do? They released another update for the game. It really shouldn't surprise you at this point. It's kind of what Frenchbred does. This was Under Night In-Birth EXE Late CLR, abbreviated as Uniclear, Unicorn. It's Under Night Unicorn now.
Unicorn.
I give up. And for the first time, this update would release worldwide at the exact same time in February of 2020, which was just the best possible time to release a new version of your fighting game that didn't have great online. This was probably the smallest update to the game yet. There was, of course, a balance update. Several characters now got brand new moves.
I'm still so sad. Like, we're gonna get back to the Soul Calibur retrospective after this, but like, the fact that Soul Calibur 6 is so fun, it is such a fun game. And yet it died because of 2020. Man. Well, at least it looks like Bandai is hiring people for a quote-unquote new fighting game with character customization, so we can still hope. Soul Calibur 7, maybe.
But after that, there was one brand new character add, and that was about it. This fighter was Lodrekia Light, a high-ranking member of the organization.
No kidding. I believe the first time Kane read Londrekia's name, he read it as Londrakaya. I think he probably can still maybe mispronounce it that way if he reads it and doesn't remember.
Ritter Shield. What is Ritter Shield? Well, remember how I said after Wallenstein left Lich Christ hundreds of years ago, their leader Adelheid became so angry that she banned men from serving in her army? Well, she had to put all those male soldiers somewhere, so she created Ritter Shield and declared that Ritter Shield would be underlings to Lich Christ. But Lodrekia wants Adelheid to recognize Ritter Shield as equal, so he trained his whole life to take down the Lich Christ star pupil. That's right, he is Wagner's rival, and since Wagner uses fire, then by the intrinsic laws of Mortal Kombat, that means that Lodrekia must use ice. He can freeze you, plays traps on the stage, he zooms around the stage like he's a figure skater.
Really cool
He's
character.
a very strong character, but he's also kind of a big brain character. You can't just throw out his ice moves and hope that freezes the opponent. No,
Oh yeah, I think it's really like a set play character, right? But I believe he also has the benefit of like a one-button DP, but honestly that might be his force function. I don't know, I didn't play this character.
you need to be at the exact right distance from your opponent to make that happen, so you gotta think everything through. But that was it for this version of the game. As I said, this was definitely the smallest update that Under Night had gotten so far. So you know what? Since we got some time, let's talk about something that I have been pointing off this entire episode and it's one of the biggest selling points of this game. The presentation. In the vast sea of fighting games, you need your tile to have its own look, its own style. You need something that makes it stand out, and there is nothing else out there like Under Night. After deciding that this tile would have more of a light novel feel, the characters were designed to be more fashionable, and I think they nailed it. Each of these fighters look like they're ready to pose on an album cover. A very moody album cover. And Yoshihara mentioned that he was a fan of Darkstalkers, and I'm not just mentioning that because I have a problem and I will always shove Darkstalkers into any conversation. No, I'm bringing that up because he says that made him want to give this game a dark and spooky tone. However, it's not your typical gothic horror. No, this feels far more modern. This game's story revolves heavily around online rumors. The Voids resemble the type of shadow people that you would find in creepypastas. The setting is a major metropolis that feels incredibly real, but everything
Persona?
is empty, giving it this disturbing, uncanny feeling. The kind of horror that Under Night goes for is the online urban legend brand of horror, and I can't think of another fighting game out there that goes for that aesthetic. And of course, when talking about the visuals of Under Night, we have to bring up its most striking feature. Whatever the hell all this text is, every inch of the screen before
Second
and after the
clause,
fight
divide.
is loaded with paragraphs of text that slide on and off the screen so fast you will never read it. On the character select screen, on the versus screen, on the round start, there is a novella in every frame of this game.
I mean, isn't it basically like they blamed the beast, but just in text form?
And then, of course, there's the actual terminology. If you want your fighting game to stand out from others, then you can't just say round one fight. Nah. You have to give it some flavor, and you have to give it your own spin. And when you start up a round of Under Night, you get treated to immortalize, recurring void effect, first clause.
I mean, okay. We're going for the Chudy style anyways, so it's time to come up with words that sound cool that maybe don't make the most sense in this scenario, but it fits because it sounds cool.
Divide. And hey, what was that underneath the divide there? I think I saw
Who knows?
something else. All right. Kill each other, but it's good inverse. Oh, right, of course. You can't start a friendly match without kill each other, but it's good inverse. This crazy terminology and walls of text have become some of the biggest jokes about Under Night, but I say jokes as a positive. Nobody
Well, no. When it becomes a meme, then people know about it because it gets spread throughout the internet. Like, people maybe have seen those things in memes, but they don't even know about Under Night. And the moment they see it, they're like, wait a minute, I recognize that. There have been plenty of times where that's happened to me on this channel. Don't underestimate the power of memes.
is laughing at Under Night for this. We're laughing with it. The FGC loves this about this game. Under Night would not be what it is without all of this. If you put out a brand new Under Night and it just said round one fight, I would tell you to put that back in the oven because it is not done yet.
Yeah.
However, as good as all of the visuals in this game are, they are dwarfed by the music. I will say this with zero.
I've mentioned this already. I am in the 0.05% top listeners of Raito. Raito is so good at making music. I don't know. There's just something about his music that just it motivates me, man. I just want to listen to it day in and day out, and I don't get bored of it either. I don't know why. I wish I was more knowledgeable about music so I could talk about it and describe why exactly. And honestly, I'll say that about like all the music reactions that we've done so far and people keep telling us to do. I don't know shit about music. I just appreciate it.
Zero hint of exaggeration. I think Under Night In-Birth has the most underrated soundtrack of any fighting game. Because sure, I will admit, I think there's a few fighting games out there that have better songs than this, but everyone acknowledges those games. Under Night is fairly unknown by the larger audiences, but I guarantee I could put on this album and you'd all start rocking out to it. Hell, you probably already have. I can't tell you how many times I've been watching a random YouTube video and suddenly I hear Under Night music in the background. There's like a secret club of YouTube editors out there who just trade Under Night tracks back and forth with each other. Each song has so much speed and impact to it. It is pure adrenaline, and they fit the characters so well. Byakuya's theme has this incredibly quick tempo and playfulness to it that almost sounds like it was designed to go hand in hand with his maniacal laughter. Gordeau's track, just like the man himself, hits hard, feels threatening, but is undeniably cool. And Hyde's theme has this great build-up until it just erupts.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect for giving each match this rising intensity. And dear...
Also kind of like a perfect start to an album as well. It really gets you hyped for the next track of Under Night In-Birth that you're about to listen to.
God, the guitar and keyboard riffs in these tracks are some of the best in any game. I can feel the musicians' fingers catching on fire as they play. But now that we got that out of the way, let's return to the present. Under Night had seen its biggest success yet with Eunice.
Actually, if you guys have a favorite track, let me know in the comments. I'd probably have to say that my favorite track is Altenum's theme, but I use Linnier's theme for my intros because I just feel like it's more suited towards that. And I suppose, while I do like Enkidu as a character and enjoy playing him a lot, I feel like his theme just doesn't really vibe with me. Not that it's bad, but it's just not my style, I guess.
For a main game on the biggest fighting game stage of the world, they had the wind at their back and the future was looking bright. So it was time to continue the story of the Hollow Knight with their next update, which this time would actually, finally, continue the story of the Hollow Knight.
Finally. Uni 2? Yeah, has to be. This is the OP. Actually, was that Kaguya in, like, the silhouette of Kaguya in the very first game? I thought I'd like Kaguya, but her gameplay just didn't mesh with me. Who won? Bro just has too much aura.
Under Night In-Birth 2 would release worldwide on January 25th, 2024, and no, your eyes are not playing tricks on you. There is an actual number in that tile now. That's right, we're in Sequel Town, baby! After over 10 years, the plot finally advanced, and so did the gameplay. In fact, I'd be willing to say that out of all the previous updates, this one feels the most significant. Don't get me wrong, it still resembles the previous games, combos work the same way, all the moves and mechanics are still here, but there's just enough changes made that it does actually feel like a brand new game. It earns that 2 in the title. For starters, your meter builds faster. In an interview with Anime News Network, Kamoni Serizawa said, quote, "We felt that sometimes the fights were just a little dull, and we thought about how to make them a bit more exciting. And we wanted the game to look a lot more flashy. A very easy way to do that was to give them more gauge to play with. So that was one thing that we did. We adjusted the growth of the gauge so that way people could get access to more of their special moves and make the game a little more flashy to watch. And yeah, mission accomplished. Yep. I definitely know the super's being thrown out way more often in Under Night 2. You can now spin that Excess meter like never before. Although in most games when I say that, I'm saying it as a compliment. You've all heard me talk before about the importance of your cool moves budget. How many resources you need for your moves and how much work it takes to get those resources compared to how good your moves are. Does it feel like the work you put into it is worth the move you get? And in here, your cool moves budget is low. You can get so much meter. But honestly, as weird as it's going to be for me to say this, I think it might be a little bit too low. I think that cool moves budget should maybe be a little bit more expensive. Yeah, this game feels like it leans more into aggression than the previous Under Nights, and hey, I do enjoy aggressive gameplay. But as I pointed out, one of the things that made Under Night unique was it balanced itself between offense and defense. It was a game that was more about blocking and spacing and gaining a good poke rather than just going in and relentlessly attacking.
And we kind of got
and there was an appeal to that. But now it feels a bit more like the anime fighters that people kept comparing it to, and that does take away a bit of its identity. And this isn't just me saying this, no, players were critical at launch of how offense-heavy it was. Don't get me wrong, Under Night 2 is still a good game. Players still liked it. I don't want to make it sound like this game came out and people started chucking their copies in a bonfire. No.
Oh yeah, no. Just because of that, I don't think so. The game is still incredibly fun. But in some ways, I can understand what Thorgi is talking about. And especially if that was the type of gameplay that you really enjoyed, that slower back and forth routine of both opponents, I can see why you'd have some issues with this game. At least for me and the level that I was playing at, I didn't really spot any of this because I was just trying to, know what buttons to press and the right order to do them. And seeing all the cool and flashy moves was just very appealing. As I said, it's just fun to press buttons in this game.
People like this game. People were happy with it. Just some people liked the last version more, and that hadn't really happened with Under Night. And speaking personally, I'll admit, when the game first came out, I did like the previous versions of Under Night more. This one just felt a little bit off. It felt like there was just too much stuff going on. However, after spending a couple months with it and getting used to the game, I've completely come around on it. Now this is my new favorite version of Under Night. Once I got used to it, I came to love all the balance adjustments and all the brand new additions they made to the gameplay. Speaking of those additions,
yeah, it's hard to really determine, I think, when or whether or not a fighting game has too much going on in it. Because more often than not, at least in my experience, I feel like when you're playing a game and you're new to it, and there's a lot of things happening at the same time, you don't really know what's going on and you kind of get overloaded. But the more you get familiar with it, it's almost like things get slower, simply because you recognize things faster. So like all these effects and stuff, they don't really kind of trip you up because you know what's going to happen and you kind of expect things to happen, so you're kind of prepared for that more so. So yeah, like whenever I get overwhelmed by a video game, like any new game that I play that's new, I try to keep it in my mind that I'll spend a couple of sessions playing this. A month or two later, I'll probably get used to it. That's how it's always been.
Under Night 2 includes 3 totally new mechanics. First up, there is a brand new type of Vorpal called Celestial Vorpal. Now if you charge your grid up so much that when the Vorpal timer runs out, you have more than 50% of the overall grid, then it just gives you all the remaining slots. Yes, they implemented a feature that says that if you're doing so well, you get even a toe into your opponent's side of the grid, you get all of your opponent's grid. I'll admit, at first I didn't really see much of a point to this because it felt like a real the rich get richer style mechanic. It felt like it was saying, hey,
win more.
You're already in the lead. Let's put you even more in the lead. But that's because I play at more of a casual level, and by that I mean I'm not very good. And if you're playing at my level, odds are you're never going to see this hit. You have to actually work to make Celestial Vorpal happen at that level of gameplay. But then I started watching high-level footage of the game and I realized, oh, this isn't here for the guy who lands 30 hits in a row. This is here for the guy who blocks 30 hits in a row. Yeah, grid still rises fast while you're blocking in this game, and if you spend 10 seconds straight successfully blocking everything that your opponent throws at you, then you're going to go Celestial Vorpal, stare your opponent in the face and say, my turn. So yeah, when I look at this as more of a comeback mechanic, it's kind of awesome. Then there's a brand new attack called the Steer Ender. This is a move that can only be done while in a combo by hitting A and B, and as the name implies, it's an ender. When you realize that you're getting close to the end of your combo, hit these two buttons and it'll finish things off with a big attack. However, if you use it right after you start a combo, it'll give you a big boost to your grid. So if you land a hit on your opponent, you may be tempted to keep the combo going, but if you notice that the Vorpal timer is about to run out and you really want that buff, you can choose to hit Steer Ender after only one hit, get a boost to your grid, and now you've turned the tides on your opponent and you're the one with Vorpal.
Cool. Yeah, introducing these two new mechanics in order to add more complexity to something that people are already familiar with, being the grid gauge, I think is a really neat idea. Now, obviously, this is new to me, even though I played Under Night in Birth 2. I recognize it from the tutorial, but I never really understood how to use it. Hearing it explained by Thorgi here makes a whole lot more sense to me, at least.
Although, on the other side of that coin, if you save your Steer Ender after a big long combo, then it will actually use some of your grid. I'm assuming the idea here was that if you choose to sacrifice a big combo by ending it early with a Steer Ender, then you'll get a bonus to your grid. But if you do the big long combo and then you decide to get greedy and go in for one more hit, then it's going to cost you. And lastly, there's a brand new move called Creeping Edge. You perform this by pressing 3D, in other words, diagonally down forward and D. When you do this, you'll do a quick dodge forward that gets past moves and escapes an opponent who's constantly pressuring you. And while this does seem strong, you can be thrown out of it, which leads into a grid break.
Gotcha. I kept doing that on accident, not gonna lie. I think I was like trying to use my super, and then I would keep on doing that. But I guess it's basically like a dodge forward, like in Grand Blue. And you can just get thrown out of it if your opponent catches you.
I like the Creeping Edge. I think out of all the additions made to this version of the game, this is probably the strongest. It's fun, it's useful, it definitely has a purpose, but it's not broken. There is a downside to it, there's a risk to using it. It's actually a pretty decent mechanic. So combat-wise, still good. Still felt like Under Night, even if some players thought it was a little too aggressive now. But even those players were taking this game online so much more now. Because now you could actually take this game online. Sure, the previous versions had online, and online that shook and sputtered so much you'd think it ran on coal. Yes, Kamone Serizawa, who I remind you was a pro fighting game player, argued with his team for years that they needed rollback netcode, long before that became the standard in the industry.
He had to argue with his team for that. It's crazy to me to think of a time where people were actively saying don't use rollback. Now, I've mentioned this before, I just don't understand the reason why, but maybe that's just because I have hindsight and maybe there's some sort of technical stuff behind it or money involved in it in order to make it work. But rollback is just so much better because we have played a delay-based netcode, a fighting game before, and me here in Southeast Asia, Kane over in Europe playing with each other, it's not the greatest time when the connection isn't great. Because, like, oftentimes when I'm playing a fighting game against Kane, I have to predict 1 or 2 seconds in the future what's about to happen. I press buttons and hopefully that thing happens. If it doesn't, then I just lose. You don't have that many issues when it comes to rollback, though. Like, there are some times where it's a bit stuttery or, like, characters will start teleporting and stuff, but that's the only when it gets really bad.
Problem is, French Bread had no idea how to implement a netcode. So when they moved to home consoles, they paired up with Arc System Works to provide the online. But if you know anything about Arc System Works, their games had some of the worst online in the industry. That is until Guilty Gear Strive released in 2021 with one of the best rollback netcodes on the market.
Yeah, and that's why I didn't know that, because the very first game I experienced from Arc Sys was Guilty Gear Strive.
Connections in that game were shockingly good and a big eye-opening moment for the entire industry for the importance of rollback. So now with Under Night 2, Arc System Works finally had the know-how to give this game the netcode it needed. And for the first time ever, it actually feels good to take Under Night online. But as I said, this game was an actual sequel, so beyond just a few new mechanics, the game also saw an update graphically. Don't get me wrong, All the old sprites from the last game were still here. French bread doesn't throw anything out if it still works. But there were a ton of brand new stages. The UI elements all got an update, and we saw characters gain
really
brand new
good.
moves, brand new victory animations, and brand new unique pre-round interactions. And these were all great. They give each of these characters way more, well, character. In fact, speaking of that, this is totally subjective, so maybe it's just me, but the writing feels way better too. Not that it was bad in the previous installments. Well, okay, the spelling errors and how much the story stretched out was bad, but when it came to the dialogue, it was fine.
You do get better. I don't know, potentially a new writer, maybe, who knows, but I definitely think with more experience and player feedback that they kind of adjusted things to be the way that it is now. Not exactly mind-blowing, but probably better than what Thorgi experienced in the previous games.
Definitely felt like it was being made by people brand new to writing their own stories. But now characters sound way more distinct. They definitely feel more realized with personalities that are uniquely theirs. And there are some characters that go through some really emotional moments in this story, and there are some other ones who have some really humorous moments that actually got some good chuckles out of me. I like the characters in the original game, they were alright, but now, I'd count some of them among my all-time favorites. This is a great cast of characters. But speaking of this game being an actual sequel, that extends to the story as well, because for the first time, we finally got a continuation of the plot. Granted, there was once again no story mode. No, we were back to just meat and potatoes arcade ladders, just like the fighting game forefathers intended. And just like in the first game, the story begins in the middle of the action, so there's no real explanation about how we got to this point. There is a little info on the character select screen telling you what every character has been up to since the last game.
These are fun to read.
So you do get some kind of an intro, but I'm mostly bringing this up because I find it hilarious that most fighting games will pick one ending from the previous game to be the canonical one. Not here.
We
Each
picked all of
character's
them.
bio says they confronted and defeated Hilda in the last game, which means that either they didn't want to sell on one ending so they left it up to you, or it means that on the last Hollow Knight, as Hilda was about to become a god, a line of people just formed outside the building, patiently waiting their turn to kick her ass. Hilda wanted to become a god and she ended up going 0-20 that night. But after this battle, Linnea's brother Kuon reappeared. You remember him? He's got the other half of the seal with the secret to Exus inside of him, which also made him immortal. But Kuon didn't react as well to this as Linne did. Apparently being alive for 500 years filled with curse energy left Kuon with a real bad case of the murders. Kuon now wants to take Hyde's insulator and the other half of the seal from Linne and take them to the abyss at the center of the Hollow Knight, and then use them to open the doorway to the other world where all the voids come from, so that way he can face his true rival, Higgins.
Ooh!
Yeah, you know, Higgins. Kuon's old rival. Exists in the Void World? Yeah, come on, you know him. Okay, so, hey, about that, nobody knows who the hell Higgins is. And I don't mean in the game, I mean literally nobody knows him. There is zero information in this game, in interviews, or anywhere else online about who Higgins is. The only mention of him in this entire game is when you beat the arcade layer with Kuon. He then jumps into the Void World and says he's going to fight Higgins, and I swear to you, that is
That's where it ends.
Well, you know what? If French Bread isn't going to tell us anything, then screw it. I'm just going to make it up myself. Remember how Kuon's whole village learned about Exus from that one stranger who came to the town and they called him the Hollow God? Yeah, screw it. That's Higgins. Prove me wrong, French Bread. The point is, Kuon is trying to open the doorway to the abyss, and it will engulf the world in void, so now everyone is heading towards the center of the Hollow Knight to stop him. Except for Waldstein. I mentioned he spent the last 500 years watching over Linne because he owed Kuon his life and he was trying to fulfill a request from him. Well, in the biggest twist of this game, the moment that Kuon appears and says, hey, I'm going to try and end the world, Waldstein walks out with the NWO theme playing. Yeah, he owed Kuon a debt and he is still trying to repay it, and this isn't one of those situations where he's like, oh, but I owe him this debt, but I love this world, and I have so many fond memories of Linne and Hyde, and I want to work alongside them, but no, I must betray them. Oh, I don't know what to do. No, there's no doubts in Waldstein's mind. Kuon says he's going to try and end the world, and to do that, he's going to need Waldstein's help, and Waldstein will have to fight a lot of strong opponents, and Waldstein went, oh, dude. You have no idea how long I've been waiting to hear that. Repay my debt to my longtime friend and fight a lot of strong opponents? Those are my two favorite things! There are a couple of other character developments that are important, such as Hyde now has to learn how to fight without the help of Linne. Bordeaux, a man who had always been defined by greed, now realizes he wants to fight on the behalf of other people. Carmine is just flat out dying, which, yeah, man, you rip your own body apart in order to use your powers. I'm honestly surprised you made it this long. The human body does not have that much blood inside of it. But Waldstein is definitely the biggest surprise. Now, there are 3 new characters in the starting roster and 3 more added as DLC. First up from Lich Trice is Kaguya, who actually made her first appearance all the way back in Aurier's arcade ending in the very first game.
There you
Kaguya
go.
is very upstanding and well-mannered. She even comes off a little bit aloof and flighty at times. But she wasn't always like this. She used to be crude and foul-mouthed. She grew up in a horribly abusive home and even had to shoot her own father. Then Lich Trice took her in and completely turned her life around. She uses guns, so obviously she's got some zoning, but she's kind of a wild card. Her shots ricochet across the screen, and she can even stun the opponent with them. So if you're the type of player who can think about 8 steps ahead at all times, you can set up attacks to juggle your opponents into massive combos.
Kaguya combos are pretty darn cool to see, but also very difficult to pull off. Well, I was trying to learn them, but like, the constant side switching really tripped me up.
Now remember I mentioned Phonon was rescued by a group of students who fight to protect people from voids called the EFG? Well, our next character is Tsurugi, the second in command of the EFG. Tsurugi is the nicest guy you'll ever meet. Too nice even. He's overly friendly and constantly talking. He's the kind of guy who sees Hyde and he thinks that they're friends and rivals, and Hyde just goes, "Dude, I barely know you, leave me alone." But Tsurugi just thinks he's joking. He's also got a big hero mentality about himself, and to match that, his weapon is a giant shield. In combat, you're going to want to use that shield to, well, block, but after that, you can use it to slide into the opponent, drop down on top of them, or unleash a string of Rekka attacks that have some pretty good speed and range to them. As I said, Tsurugi's a pretty straightforward guy, so in combat, you basically want to use that shield to get in close, and then
He's pretty straightforward, but also really damn annoying to play against a good Tsurugi.
and start swinging away. Then finally, we got our boss of the game, Kuon. And boy, he sure is a boss character, alright. He's fast, swings around a ton of swords, and just has so many tools at his disposal. Listen, you fought boss characters before, you know what they can do. But then we get into the DLC, and we start with the total wild card, Uzuki. She's another high-ranking member of Amnesia.
Probably the scariest person to fight in the entire game, not gonna lie. She just throws so much at you. It's hard to really tell, like, what to block, when to be blocking, when it's your turn. But her throwing the coffin out, sitting on top of it, and just smacking you with it is kind of funny.
And even appeared in Hilda's ending in the first game, but only if you got a high enough score to get the secret ending. Well, despite basically being an Easter egg in that game, she still left an impact on audiences, because French Bread held a popularity poll asking what character should be added as DLC, and she was
style.
Easily the winner. In the lore, she is incredibly powerful, but also kind of an X factor. Even the other members of Amnesia don't know what to make of her. She's got a morbid sense of humor, she summons out skeletons, ghosts, demons, and she hangs out with a guy who dresses like a vampire and a robot. She's so strange and her powers are so sinister, people actually wonder if she's really an in-birth or a void that grew so strong she fully took on a human form. As for her playstyle, there's no other way of putting it. Uzuki is nutty. She turns the entire stage into a spirit Halloween store. She summons skeletons out of the ground, she can use a coffin to juggle you into the air in a variety of ways, which actually makes me think that some of her moveset might have come from the original plans that they had for Aurier all the way back when this game started.
Maybe.
But speaking of somebody who loves everything creepy and spooky and Halloween related, I love this character aesthetically, but man, I do not have the brain to play her. You need to have a plan when you start playing this character, and you need to map everything out. Then there was Ogre. You've been hearing me talk about Ogre this entire video. He was the leader of Amnesia's rival gang, Bankikai, and he died jumping into the abyss to seal it back up in the events leading up to the very first game. Ogre is actually a very chill guy. He's upbeat, he's charming, he is also very obsessed with women. In his arcade mode ending, he says, "Hey, at least I saved all the women of the world," only to then get mad when he realizes he also saved all the men of the world. He's like if Sanji got mixed up with the mob. But you're probably wondering, wait, if Ogre jumped into the abyss, then how is he back? Yeah, he's kind of wondering that too. He has no memories of how he returned. He doesn't even know if he's actually real or if he's a void that just absorbed all the memories of Ogre. And considering this is his big Infinite Worth Exis attack.
Yeah, him turning into a demon? Maybe. Might be.
Yeah, he might be onto something. Now, I said that Izuki was one of the more complex characters in this game, so to balance that out, Ogre is incredibly straightforward, and his plan for battle is keep punching things until they don't get back up. He is a brawler who just goes in and applies tons of punishing pressure.
It's really fun to play.
I would say out of all these DLC characters, he's definitely the easiest one to start with. And the final new character is Izumi. So I said that Kuon is trying to open the door to the Abyss so that way he can enter the world of the Voids. And to do that, he needs the other half of the seal from Lene and hide Sword the Insulator. But there's one more element that he needs that has never been mentioned before. I still think Mori P was helping them to craft this story at this point. What they needed was the key to the door, the Initiator. And the Initiator is not Izumi. No, Izumi is a sweet, kind girl who doesn't like fighting and honestly doesn't even fully understand what the Knight is. Don't worry, Izumi. You're not alone in that. However, Izumi is paired up with a mystical fish. And this fish is the Initiator. And whenever there's trouble in the night, this fish tells this poor confused girl that she needs to go into the night so that way they can protect the world. Izumi is a great character. Her personality is really fun to mix with the rest of this cast. In fact, I'll go ahead and say it. The 3 new DLC characters, Izumi, Ogre, and Uzuki, are all home runs. Each of them are some of my favorites in this entire series. As for her gameplay, Izumi fights with water, and yeah, that really kind of describes her combat. It's all about flowing from one move into another. Yes, I know I just described what a combo is, but when you pick her up, you'll see what I mean. Her attacks have a lot of Rekka elements to them. You can keep hitting buttons to keep adding on to her combos, making her gameplay feel very fluid. As I pointed out long ago, every single character in this game has the ability to pop opponents into the air and then knock them back down to the ground, but with Izumi it all feels so smooth, just going from one attack into the next. And you can use her force function to call out her fish partner Effie, which will add even more options onto her combos. Izumi is one of those characters who I would recommend to brand new players as well as experienced pros. It really does feel like there's something in this character for all skill levels. Also,
I see. I didn't really try her out that much, but I can maybe see that. It's really cool, though, that obviously the character has a very particular theme about them, and even just playing the character itself makes you feel that theme. That, I think, is just both good character design and good gameplay design.
Her animations are amazing. The fish and her scarf are some of the best looking sprites in this game. But that brings us to the end of the game. So let's see exactly how the story of the Hollow Knight ends. And I do mean ends, they actually wrapped up the story in this game. Now again, there's no ending that's marked as the canonical one. It's an old school arcade ladder where everyone gets to have the big showdown with Kuon. And in Kuon and Hilda's endings, as you might imagine, they plunge the world into darkness. But in Waldstein's ending, he absorbs the seals from both Lene and Kuon into his body, thereby sacrificing himself, but in the process, freeing Lene and Kuon from their immortality curses. It's actually kind of touching. In fact, he's the only character in this arcade mode who ends up dying. So yeah,
is that his plan all along?
Pretty alright guy. He did betray Lene so that way he could go and work for his old friend, but in the end, he really just wanted to help out everybody. And fight. He mostly just wanted to fight. That was the main thing that he was all about. But outside of those and a few others, most of the endings are essentially the same. Kuon is defeated, the door to the Abyss is destroyed, thereby forever ending the Hollow Knight. This results in Lene finally becoming mortal again, and she can once again live her life without the curse of resurrection. All the Inbirths start to lose their powers, and more shockingly of all, the humans who had turned into Voids all return to normal. We see Ogre and Gordo's friend Roger returning to life, and even Merkaba discovers that he had been human all along as he regains his original body.
Oh shit!
I'm torn on whether or not to use the SpongeBob "good grief he's naked" or "oh no he's hot" joke.
What the fuck? That's what Merkaba looks like as a human? Bro, Merkaba's gotta be Survey's favorite character if Survey ever saw that. In the far future, whenever Survey gets enough time to do like a character designer ranks video again on Under Night, I maybe have to slip that one to them just as like a little bonus. Not to rate it, but just like, if you know, you know.
And so, that was it. The story of the Hollow Knight had come to an end. Although I will stress, just the story of the Hollow Knight. The developers have said that they would be willing to do more games in the Under Night series in the future, but they wanted this game to end the story they started over 10 years ago. And I have to say,
that's fair.
I'm pretty impressed that they were willing to give this game an ending. So many fighting game franchises are afraid to move past their beginning.
Go on forever.
Street Fighter
Yeah.
is going to bring back Bison forever and ever. Mortal Kombat will keep rebooting their timeline. Heihachi Mishima will not die. But this game actually said, hey, you know the entire premise of our games? Yeah, it's done.
It's done.
Honestly, I have to respect that. But with Under Night 2 finally...
I mean, it could be really cool if we moved on from this and then some completely new plot thread comes up and new characters show up because of that, and we work off of new systems that are both different but also still familiar. Like, I think it has a lot of potential. But of course, doing something like that is quite risky, and you don't really know how audiences are going to receive that. But hey, like, so far, FrenchBit hasn't been scared to experiment and find new things, and some of them actually worked out for Under Night, so hopefully whatever game they release in the future is going to also be a smash hit. I think for now, though, they're still working on Uni 2, right? Because, I mean, the new DLC character got announced. Unless if they have a separate team working on something new already.
How did it do? I've talked about how this franchise slowly built up a dedicated competitive player base, but it still never reached that larger casual audience. But now, after years of game momentum, this felt like the perfect time to finally make that happen. To finally make its name known. That, unfortunately, did not happen. In fact, Under Night 2's release kind of went under the radar for many people. But why is that? Is it because this combat was so complex? Is it because this still felt like an older arcade-era game?
I feel like it's slowly gaining in popularity, but then again, I don't have the numbers. It's just the fact that, you know, I know of it, I've seen it, it's on Evo, there's a lot of people signing up to play it, so I feel like it's gaining momentum, but what do I know?
Did casual audiences not want a game with sprites? Was it too outdated? I don't know. It's really hard to say, and I don't think there's any one specific reason.
Did this release at the same time as like Tekken 8 releasing? Was that it?
Although if I had to say there was one specific reason, it might have had something to do with the fact that this game released on January 25th, 2024. And you know what else released on literally the exact same day? The biggest fighting game release of the year.
Yikes.
Yes, Tekken 8 released on, and again, I cannot stress this enough, literally the exact same day.
We maybe should have delayed it a little bit. I didn't know this fact, actually. Okay, that explains it. But yeah, like, Tekken 8 is currently not in people's good graces, and I think what I heard was that more people signed up for Uni than they did for Tekken. So maybe things are shifting? But yeah, I can see on initial release the game not doing very good because of that. Hell, it's basically like an Elden Ring situation, but for the fighting game community. Because there were so many games that had to delay their release because, you know, the DLC for Elden Ring was going to release, so they're like, we should probably wait so that our investment and time doesn't go completely to waste because people are just spending their money on Elden Ring.
Why? Oh, why would you release your fighting game? A game in a genre that is known for being niche and having audiences that need to focus all their time on one specific game on the exact same day as your biggest competition that year. I've looked for answers from the studio, but I've never even seen them acknowledge this outside of a very brief mention of, oh yeah, you know, some other games released around that time, we don't need to say which ones. It honestly boggles my mind. It's not like they needed the sales right then. Most games need to come up with money before the end of the fiscal year. The fiscal year ends in March.
Just started.
You could have pushed this back 2 months and been fine. This decision is just baffling to me, and I've heard people argue, no, it's fine. Tekken and Under Night are very different types of fighting games. They appeal to different audiences. Listen,
I don't know about that one. I feel like a lot of fighting game people play many different fighting games and not just the one series. And especially if you're trying to sell it to the fighting game community, which is already pretty niche, then you probably want to sell at a time where no other fighting games are out, because then you're like the new hot stuff, right? So the entire community can rally around you, not splitting that already small community.
don't deny that Tekken and Under Night are very different games. But you're assuming that there is no overlap in that Venn diagram. You're assuming nobody who plays Under Night also plays Tekken, and I have bad news for you. There's a lot of Under Night fans who also play Tekken.
Fighting game players
and there's a
play
lot of
fighting
people
games
out there who are just fighting game fans. They like to check out whatever the new release is. And if they have to choose between two options on the same day, they're going to go for the bigger release. But more importantly, as I said, Under Night was still struggling to reach that casual audience. And you know what would have helped with that? If all the big fighting game YouTubers and streamers found themselves thinking, man, there aren't any new games out. What am I going to talk about? Oh, hey, Under Night just came out. I can play that for a few weeks. But instead, all those creators said, oh, hey, Tekken is out. I am going to talk about this and only this for the next month.
Especially in these smaller communities, you really can't underestimate the power of like what social media can do for you, or content creators covering your game can really do for the spread of your product. I think especially in the fighting game community, where obviously they're going to jump on the new release because it's content. People are interested in it, so if people want to watch it, then you better be there to make content about it. It's just not the greatest idea ever. I really feel like whoever made the decision to release it then kind of failed the game and the company.
I hate saying this, but there's no other way of putting it. This was a huge missed opportunity by French Bread.
For sure.
So, considering the game that it released against, was Under Night 2 a success? Well, that's hard to say because the sales numbers haven't been shared. The closest I've found is that according to Game Sensors, they sold about 20,000 copies in their first week on Steam, but Game Sensors uses a collection of analytics that they then punch into an algorithm to basically just take a wild guess at the sales, so in other words, that means nothing.
So, I mean, they're still making DLC characters for the game, so one would assume that it has done well enough to deserve that. But yeah, like obviously we don't have any numbers here.
Well, we can take a look at the active Steam numbers, and they are rather low.
Yeah, not very high.
In fact, they're exactly what the numbers were for the last Under Night game right before Under Night 2 release. Which does mean that player base remained consistent, but it also means they didn't bring in many new players. So, what about the tournament scene? Well, in 2019, the EVO numbers for Eunice were 1,100. Really good for a smaller title. But in 2024, the registration numbers for Under Night 2 were just under 800, a definite drop. So yeah, the numbers don't speak highly. Luckily though, success takes many forms. Yes, Steam player numbers are low, but so were the numbers for the other Under Nights, and those numbers still sold well enough for French Bread to keep making this franchise for 10 years. And the registration numbers for EVO dropped, but who said EVO is the only tournament around? Sure, it's the biggest tournament, but Under Night didn't build its audience at EVO. It built it at smaller scenes, in locals. It formed its own community, and it's that community that kept it going throughout all these years. So let's take a look at that specific community. I mentioned that in 2018, in Atlanta, Georgia, a tournament was started all about French Bread games and other anime fighters in the same vein, Climax of Night. Well, in 2022, the last year before Under Night 2 came out, Under Night In Birth EXE Late CLR received almost 200 entries. Then, in 2024, when Under Night 2 released, those numbers jumped to 400.
Double. Yeah.
It doubled. That's pretty significant.
That's pretty nice.
It was the biggest player numbers this tournament had ever seen. And then the next year, for its final show, those numbers jumped again to 500. Yeah, its numbers jumped by another 25% the year after the game came out. That almost never happens. As I said, Climax of Night unfortunately had to come to an end, but it wasn't because of a lack of players.
Y'all may need to... God damn, it's a lot of y'all in here. Look at all them people.
In fact, I say Climax of Night came to an end, but that's not entirely true, because it was so popular and this player base was so dedicated that Climax of Night has now been merged into Combo Breaker to get its own dedicated stage and side tournament each year at this event. That's right, the night now lives on because that player base was too strong to die. In fact, speaking of Combo Breaker, let's look at their numbers, and at Frosty Faustines and CE Otaku. Each of these major events hosted Under Night 2 tournaments over the past 2 years, where this tiny indie darling stood side by side with the big boys, coming in the top 5 attendance at each of them. So, I asked, was Under Night 2 a success? And I asked that because recently I've been thinking about that word a lot. There's definitely been a trend I've noticed over the past several years with fighting games aiming for bigger budgets, bigger teams.
To succeed.
And as a result, they need to sell higher and higher numbers than ever. And don't get me wrong, that isn't just fighting games. That's the game industry as a whole. But fighting games always used to be a genre that thrived in the cheap. It was a genre where some of the biggest successes didn't have big budgets. Even at the time they were released, a lot of classic fighting games were considered low budget. But now we're seeing a massive explosion in huge fighting games with mountains of cash behind them, which is great. I'm happy to see fighting games gain that kind of attention, but it also feels like there's a narrative that's forming that now your fighting game has to be big and massive to succeed.
Yeah, this, as he said, really is just kind of spreading across the entire games industry. I think it's probably most prevalent when it comes to gacha games or like anime games, because people always say, this didn't make as much money as Genshin Impact, or Honkai Star Rail, or Zenless Zone Zero, although I believe Zenless kind of makes like the least amount of money in the Hoyoverse games. And that's kind of just become like the norm for a lot of people, when in reality, they're making too much money. Like they're making fuck off money. You don't need that much money to run a video game company. It's just that they're very successful in what they do, let's say. So then when you have a new game that releases and it makes like only like 2 or 3 million a year, people are going to say, oh, end of service, dead game. No, that's not going to be the case. I do think though that a lot of like bigger companies, whenever they make games nowadays, I feel like they don't even give the game a chance to really grow into itself, to really find an audience. The moment when it releases and the sales numbers are down, they just kind of like cut funding to the team and trash the project entirely and work on something new, which I don't think ever really results in anything great when you have that sort of mindset. But hey, you know, companies are gonna company, and I guess that's just what they do.
You have to be one of the big 3, otherwise you're failing. You have to have high player numbers that never drop, otherwise you're a dead game. When budgets get higher, the definition of success is higher too. And because of that, we're seeing fewer games. We're seeing fewer original ideas and original IPs because it's too risky to take that chance.
Yeah.
And we're seeing developers who talk about sales goals that are practically impossible to hit for any game, let alone a fighting game, a genre that has always been considered fairly niche. And
it's funny that he showed SNK here. Because, yeah, SNK has very high ambitions, which has led them to bankruptcy more than once.
We're seeing games that are popular and they do have players, but they're still crashing because they can't reach the unobtainable numbers that some AAA studios set for them.
When I was talking about video game companies cutting out projects before they really fully bloomed, I was thinking of 2XKO. Because, like, damn, we really kind of messed up here. I think there was not very good expectations. And by that, I mean not realistic expectations. And honestly, I don't really know about the monetization scheme for 2XKO. It's like, what, $50 to $60 for a character skin, something like that? That's what I heard, at least. I don't really play the game. On a rotating shop? I get that it's a free fighting game. But at that point, I'd rather just pay for one than to buy a skin for a character that costs about like a full game.
And a system like that, no matter how good it looks, is guaranteed to eventually fail.
Yeah.
How guaranteed is it? I wrote that line in this script in December of 2025, 2 months before the 2XKO layoffs.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm not a prophet, I'm just someone who understands math. However, Under Night wasn't made with a big team.
That's a small team.
It wasn't made with a big budget.
It's French bread.
This game was made by 14 guys in a cave with a box of scraps. It recycled assets. It used whatever tools they had at their disposal. And because of that, success doesn't mean the same thing to this company as it does to a major developer. I mentioned that estimate from Game Sensors, and again, that is just an estimate based on very vague measurements. There is no way in hell it's accurate. So let's say that it is wrong and it didn't sell 20,000 copies in its first week on Steam. Let's say that's how many copies it sold across all platforms. Steam, PlayStation, Switch, everything.
How much money is
If
that?
that's true, damn, 20,000 copies across all platforms in its first week. If that was a Capcom game or a Bandai Namco game, they would throw that thing in the vault to never be seen again. Well, good thing French Bread isn't Capcom or Bandai Namco. Yeah, for French Bread, 20,000 copies in its first week is actually pretty decent. And don't take my word for it. In interviews since that game launched, developers from French Bread have said that they've actually been happy with the game sales. In fact, Sarazawa, in an interview for Evo's YouTube channel, said that Izumi was supposed to be the final update for the game.
Oh, really? But the new DLC character, what does that mean? Game doing well. It has to be.
But they were so impressed with the positive reception that this game got from players that they've started asking those players, hey, what other updates would you like to see? I'm not saying that there's definitely more on the way, but what I am saying is that the sales and reception this game got were enough to make them reconsider ending the game after one season. As I've pointed out several times now, Under Night never really managed to reach that big mainstream audience. But yeah, it turns out you don't need that. Smaller games with smaller audiences can exist, and they can succeed. From day one, French Bread said they wanted to appeal to the more dedicated competitive players, even if they were a smaller audience. And as we saw from those tournament numbers, that audience has been there for them. They've gotten this budget game into the top 5s of major tournaments side by side with games that have 50 times their budget. And they've managed to keep this game going and growing for 10 years now. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's good that Under Night doesn't sell millions and I want French Bread to stay small.
I mean, yeah, no, not at all. If they sold millions, that'd be awesome. But just have to put it into perspective that for them, this is good. I think a very close example to this is, well, me and this YouTube channel. Like, I don't have the most subscribers out there, that's for sure, and we don't get a ton of views on our videos. In any other scenario, especially if you're like a big YouTuber and you have a massive team of people working for you, a ton of editors and stuff like that, getting the amount of views that I do would kind of be a death sentence to the YouTube channel. You'd have to lay off everybody. But I'm just a dude. I'm just a dude living in a country with a very low cost of living. So for me, I'm actually doing pretty well for myself. That threshold for success and making a sustainable career for myself on YouTube is so much lower than everybody else's. And that's probably the exact same case for French Bread here. Which means that I think from now on, it's only really up. As long as they keep doing good work and just, being passionate about fighting games and understanding what people want from it, I think the company will continue to grow. Now, as long as they don't grow to a size where they kind of forget about that and just fuck it all up, then that's not going to be great. But at least for now, from what I played of Under Night and Birth 2, I have faith. Like, the game is fun. It's just fun to play.
No, not at all. Go buy Under Night. Give these developers money. I don't want them to have to go back to eating convenience store French bread. No, what I'm saying is that in an industry that seems to be pushing a narrative that you can't be a success unless you hit a certain criteria, French Bread has shown for a decade now that's not true. Under Night.
That's a good point. Maybe like bigger companies can learn that you don't have to invest that much into making a game that is just fun. Just investing so much to the point where it's impossible now to meet your sales number is just not the plan. Like, you want to make money, right? And this is how you make money.
Feels like a throwback to an older era of fighting games, not because it uses sprites or it's wildly experimental, but because it shows that games that are made on a budget, that build up an audience through locals and tournaments and dedicated fans, and games full of original ideas can actually succeed. And that last part is important, because I believe that here at the end of all things, there are two major lessons to take away from Under Night. First, as I just discussed, it is possible for middle ground and budget fighters to find their audience and succeed. But the other lesson of Under Night is, to put simply, keep picking up that pencil, keep creating, keep being original. When I started this retrospective, I didn't expect any grand moral, any big message. I just figured it would be fun to look at this modern day cult classic. But as I read up on French Bread's story, I actually started to get touched. Think about their origin. This was a studio that was formed by friends who grew up wanting to make fighting games and employees whose studio had just shut down and now found themselves without a job. So they said, screw it, we got nothing left to lose, let's follow that dream. And so they spent years making games out of whatever they had access to, selling them at conventions or person to person until finally they got their break with Melty Blood. But then when that game dried up and nobody wanted to hire them, after all these years of making games based on other people's characters and stories, they decided if nobody was willing to hire them,
we're gonna do it ourselves.
They were going to make their own game. And think about that line from Narita, where after each of their older original games had failed, he was nervous about Under Night because, quote,
who wouldn't be?
We were conditioned to think that original works were synonymous with not selling. Their old attempts to make original games had failed so hard, they didn't think anyone wanted something original from them. And yes, they did change the idea several times over the course of the development, but guess what? That's called the creative process. It happens to all games.
Oh, yeah.
What's important is that in the end, they ignored those fears. They pushed ahead, and they made their own original game.
Dude, you just kind of have to rip off the Band-Aid sometimes. You just gotta go for it, man. And if it doesn't work out, then that's fine, but I feel like at the very least, you know that you tried. I think that's really where all, like, motivations start, or all the paths to chasing your dreams begin, is that taking that first step of not being afraid anymore, just go with it. Consequences be damned.
And now that game has become their most popular hit, revived their company, and been going strong for a decade. And when you look at that, I think that the best thing that you can take away from Under Night is that when times get tough, when you feel lost, keep creating. Keep making your art. Keep being original. And then eventually the darkness will fade, the night will break, and a new day will dawn. Thank you all very much for tuning in for the Under Night in Birth retrospective. It feels very good to get back to doing retrospectives. Yeah, for anybody who is new to this channel, this is the very first video that you check out. We do these retrospectives where we talk about the entire backstory and the making of these fighting games and all the bits of the development and all the story and all that. But about 2 years ago, we did a Street Fighter one, and I thought that was only going to be like 4 parts and maybe take like 6 months, and it was 7, and it took the entire course of 2 years. So it feels good to finally be talking about a brand new game, and I am making you all this promise right now. This is my goal for 2026. I want to get out 4 brand new retrospectives. This is the first one.
Oh, damn, okay.
We got 3 more that we're going to get through. So if you want to see those, then make sure that you click that subscribe button, ring that bell, do all that stuff down there, give us the thumbs up, leave a comment, let me know what your thoughts are on Under Night. When did you first find out about Under Night? It's kind of wild when I think about the fact that some random game that I saw in a bar 10 years ago ended up becoming one of my favorite fighters. Yes, leave your comments down there, share these videos around the web. It is the best way to help this channel grow. But you can also support us by joining the Patreon, which is in the description down below, just like all these fine people whose names you are seeing fly up on screen right now. Thank you guys again for tuning in. It will not be nearly as long until our next retrospective goes out. Stay safe out there, everyone, and come back next time.
Alright, dudes. Another fun retrospective from Thorgi. And really informative too, because I didn't know any of these details about like the origins of the company or anything like that. And that's what I do enjoy about a lot of the stuff that Thorgi delves into. He also goes into the real world history of it, which I just find fascinating. Especially in the case of SNK. Now that was a roller coaster. But I'm really glad that Under Night is doing well, because it's just such a fun game, and it's starting to gain that recognition that they even released a new DLC character after they thought that they were just going to end it for the game. Hope the game continues to grow, and well, if you guys haven't tried out Under Night in Birth yet, I do highly recommend it. It's so much fun. Just maybe get a friend online with you, try out some matches against each other, You'll understand what I'm talking about. But yeah, dudes, that's gonna do it from me today. So thank you guys so much for joining me. Hope you guys enjoyed your time here. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.